Having to face the truth is something everyone is forced to do eventually. If you never truly accept who you are, it becomes difficult to live honestly or comfortably. The fear of being judged, the pressure to appear as someone you're not, or the envy you feel toward others are all parts of that struggle. Persona 4 is built entirely around this idea. Its central theme isn't just about uncovering a murder mystery, but about confronting the uncomfortable parts of yourself that you'd rather keep hidden. The game constantly asks about what happens when you stop running from those feelings and allow yourself to be seen as you really are. At its core, Persona 4 is about the fear of being seen and what it takes to finally face the truth. On the surface, Persona 4 looks like a fairly standard JRPG. It's set in a quiet rural town where a group of teenagers work together to solve a series of murders. They gain supernatural abilities, they enter a strange TV world, and fight monsters known as shadows. You get to level up and fuse personas while listening to a great soundtrack, but emotionally, the game is doing something much more personal. Beneath the mystery and the combat, Persona 4 is really about people confronting the parts of themselves they'd rather keep hidden. If Persona 3 is about death being inevitable, and if Persona 5 is about rebelling against injustice, then I'd say Persona 4 is about dealing with internal conflict. The shadow versions of the characters in Persona 4 are sometimes misunderstood for evil counterparts, when this isn't the case at all. The shadows are a culmination of the exaggerated traits in each character that they refuse to acknowledge. To put it simply, the shadows aren't who the characters actually are. They're what the characters are afraid of being seen as. Think of them as manifestations of insecurities that the characters hide. Each character in the investigation team, for example, is forced to face themselves. This video isn't meant to be a deep dive on each character, but I do want to go through some brief examples in the investigation team just to give you a better idea of what I mean. Yukiko, for instance, is constantly viewed as the heir to the Amagi Inn. Her family and the town project a future onto her that she never really chose for herself. On the outside, she appears polite, graceful, and composed, but internally she feels trapped by expectations that she doesn't know how to escape. Her shadow fixates on the idea of running away and escaping. She doesn't hate her home or her friends, she just doesn't want to feel suffocated by a role that was assigned to her at birth. What makes it painful is the guilt that follows those feelings. Yukiko believes that even wanting freedom makes her selfish, and her shadow exists because she can't forgive herself for thinking that way in the first place. Rise is another character who is often misunderstood, especially at first glance. Her dungeon being depicted as a strip club doesn't exactly make the game subtle, but it does serve a purpose. Rise's shadow is born from her desire to be seen as herself. Instead of being viewed as Riseth the idol, she just wants to be seen as Rise Kujikawa, the high schooler. As an idol, she's constantly defined by how others see her, and she starts to believe that without attention or validation, there's nothing left underneath. Her shadow doesn't necessarily represent a desire to be physically seen, it's about being able to show who she truly is as a person, instead of the fake idol persona. The exaggerated sexuality isn't the truth of who she is, it's a reflection of how she believes the world views her, and how trapped she feels by that image. Kanji's character has sparked countless debates over the years about what his shadow represents. On the outside, he's a delinquent who people are wary of, and he's involved in confrontations with biker gangs. However, he also enjoys knitting, painting, and crafts. These aren't necessarily known as manly hobbies, and as a result, he feels shame from it. He tends to worry about how he's perceived because of it, especially by girls who tend to gossip more about that side of him. When Kanji's shadow says that he vastly prefers men, it's rooted in his experiences with girls who mock his hobbies and judge him for simply being himself. His entire character arc is about accepting the fact that he is his own man and that he enjoys what he enjoys. He himself says that he's scared of being rejected, regardless of what gender the person is. None of these shadows exist because the characters are bad people. They exist because the characters believe that certain parts of themselves just aren't acceptable. Persona 4 doesn't frame self-acceptance in a way where you suddenly just start loving everything about yourself. It does it in a way where you can be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Acceptance is done through acknowledging reality instead of constantly avoiding and ignoring it. The rest of the investigation team carry very similar insecurities. Yosuke feels bored and unfulfilled living in Inaba, secretly craving excitement and some meaning in his life. Chie harbors jealousy for Yukiko and uses her as a way to boost her own self-esteem, even though she still values her as a friend. Naoto has a very deep frustration and insecurity about not being accepted by her peers, as she's a female in a male-dominated work environment. She goes so far as to even dress up and act like a male to be accepted. Teddy has existential fears about who he is and what his purpose is. He doesn't have any memories and is afraid that he has no real self or sense of belonging. Even the protagonist, known as Yu Narukami, displays a fear of being alone in the Persona 4 anime. Although it isn't necessarily considered canon to the main story because he's a silent protagonist in the games, I still think it's a nice touch to add that detail. His lack of a defined personality allows the player to self-insert onto him, but it also reinforces the idea that connection is something he actively seeks through others. The game's social links reinforce this idea further, using the people of Inaba to explore different human emotions, struggles, and coping mechanisms. Despite being a small town in the middle of nowhere, Inaba ends up feeling incredibly dense with personal stories, each one reflecting a different way people try to navigate their own insecurities. The antagonists in the game are strong portrayals of this concept, but for the sake of not spoiling the main murder mystery plotline, I won't be talking about them in this particular video. Something that I'd like to touch on is the TV world and how it links to these themes of self-discovery. The TV world is a physical manifestation of escapism, a space where denial, rumors, and insecurity are given form. It exists because the characters are unwilling to confront their true feelings in the real world. Thoughts become environments, emotions become monsters, and the parts of yourself you try to ignore are impossible to escape. The dungeons aren't designed around what the characters like or who they truly are, but around how they fear being perceived. This is why the environments feel so weird and distorted. They aren't meant to be accurate reflections of the characters' identities, but instead, exaggerated expressions of their worst self-doubts. Yukiko's castle, for example, represents her fear of being trapped by expectations. It's not a place that she wants to live in, but instead it's a reflection of the role that she feels imprisoned by it. The Midnight Channel plays an important role in this as well. It doesn't show the truth, it shows what people believe to be true. Rumors and surface-level judgments are broadcasted and turned into a spectacle. The shadows that appear on the screen aren't just born from the characters themselves, but instead from how they think the world sees them. The game is trying to tell you that the fear of judgment can be just as damaging as actual rejection. When you internalize how others see you, even incorrectly, it begins to shape how you see yourself. The fog inside the TV world is a depiction of denial and the avoidance of reality. It exists to keep people in blissful ignorance instead of exposing them to the truth. In that sense, the TV world can be viewed as what happens when you run away from the truth for too long. Persona 4 promotes the idea of confronting your uncomfortable feelings because otherwise they grow instead of disappearing. In a way, the TV world exists as a warning. If you don't face yourself, then eventually those feelings will demand to be acknowledged, whether you're prepared or not. People like to poke fun at the JRPG trope where it's always teenagers saving the world, but Persona 4 having a cast of teenagers struggling with identity is arguably the most realistic part of the game. Adolescence is when those fears of judgment, rejection, and self-worth are at their loudest. Persona 4 visualizes these feelings in a dramatic way and shows us why they can be so hard to accept. The shadows turning into monsters are a way to show how scary it can be to face those feelings up front. That honesty is also what makes the investigations team chemistry work so well. Their bond isn't formed just through shared battles or common social interests, but through shared vulnerability. They've all seen each other at their worst, they've confronted the things they're most ashamed of, and they've done it together. That mutual understanding creates a level of trust that feels genuine and not forced. For reference, I first played Persona 4 Golden when it released on Steam in 2020. To this day, I still believe that it has one of the strongest main casts in video games, purely because of how naturally they interact and communicate. Their conversations feel earned, their friendships feel real, and when the game finally ends, it genuinely feels like you're saying goodbye to people you've come to know. What makes Persona 4 resonate so strongly is that it doesn't just ask its characters to face the truth, it quietly asks the same of the player. The game never forces you to relate to any one shadow directly, but chances are, at least one of them hits uncomfortably close to home. The fact that the characters and themes are such strong talking points over 15 years after the release of the original game is proof of this. It challenges the player's own perception of themselves through the discoveries and self-revelations that are seen in the game. Being judged isn't something that you should be afraid of, especially if you're being true to yourself. That's where its impact really comes from. The mystery and plot twists are obviously strong elements, but the underlying character development is what separates it from a regular JRPG. In the end, Persona 4 isn't just about monsters, murder mysteries, or saving the world. It's also about what happens when you stop lying to yourself. The game doesn't suggest that facing the truth will magically fix everything, but it does show that avoiding it only makes things worse. By forcing its characters to confront their shadows, Persona 4 reminds us that self-acceptance isn't about perfection, it's about honesty. Reaching out to the truth is twofold. You want to reach out to the truth behind the murder mystery in the main plot, but the characters are also on a journey of self-discovery along the way. The battles against random shadow monsters are tough, but finding peace and being honest with yourself is arguably the tougher fight. The only choice we really have is whether we face it on our own terms, or if we let it consume us when we're no longer able to look away.